Hey friends, it's Rabbi Jenny Solomon here with a Minhah moment on this Tuesday at Beth Myers Synagogue, actually from my home nook of Beth Myers Synagogue. And as I shared yesterday in a sort of impromptu Minhah moment on Martin Luther King Day and Tu B'Shvat, this week of Parashat Yitro, when we read the Torah portion called Yitro. Yesterday I shared a reflection really on the way in which when life becomes too much, or it became too much for Moses, there's a way in which we are really called to lean into community and to remember that all of us are needed as we create change and move through challenges in life and in society. And today I wanted to offer a part two. So I was thinking about this week, Parashat Yitro, again, not the 10 Commandments, even though that's usually considered sort of the centerpiece of this week's Torah portion, if not the whole Torah. That this Torah portion opens with a moment in which Moses, our leader and teacher, and his father-in-law, Yitro, are having a conversation. And essentially Moses is just throwing his hands up, so to speak, overwhelmed, feeling like there's just too much to handle, too much to take on, that leadership and his life, what's on his plate is just too much. And Yitro offers the eternal wisdom of the importance of delegating, of finding trusted partners to share the burden and to help navigate some of the smaller or different kinds of problems so that Moses can take on the things that he is uniquely suited to do. And as I was thinking about Moses in this moment of just total overwhelm, I was also, of course, because Torah is a commentary on life and life a commentary on Torah, I was projecting my own feelings, which are often that it all just seems like too much. And particularly right now, as we're dealing with, exposures in school with my kids and Omicron, and obviously the situation that took place over Shabbat at congregation at CBI in Texas. Sometimes it can just feel like too much. And it reminded me that there's this phrase in American culture, I don't know exactly where it comes from, but it's sort of in the ethers, that somehow like life or God, sometimes people will say that life never gives us more than we can handle. And I just want to say that is decidedly not a Jewish perspective. Right? So sometimes life does actually give us more than we feel we can handle. And I don't want to pretend otherwise. So I was reading something recently in terms of my mindfulness practice that really, really resonated with me. And so I want to offer this in terms of our Jewish mindfulness practice, in terms of our spiritual practice, because I think it's really rings true and helpful for me. So there's a teacher and author named Dr. Pollack. She teaches at Harvard Medical School, and she's written a book called SelfCompassion for Parents. And she makes the recommendation that in moments like these, when we feel like life is in fact giving us too much or more than we can handle, that there are 3 things that we can do. First is to remind ourselves, this is how things are. This is what's happening. To practice moments of clear seeing, knowing that they will change, that they're impermanent, and that we can be honest and truthful about what is happening. Our brains love to have predictability and patterns, but sometimes life breaks the pattern. And things are not how they ought to be, and they take us by surprise. And so simply being able to, in our prayer, in our seated meditation, in our yoga practice, and whatever your mindfulness practice is, be able to Notice that this is how things are right now. It's a very powerful practice. The second is actually kind of an add-on to that, and that is to say that this is how things are, and yet it's different, or they're different. So that is to say that, sometimes when we see a situation or we're managing our lives, there's such a strong tendency to tell a story about it. And oftentimes the story we tell is a story that we have told many, many times before. We're famous for this in some ways in our Jewish text. The bad guys came after us. We like to joke, especially when it comes to the holidays of Hanukkah and Purim, they tried to kill us, we won, let's eat. But I say that jokingly, but there is, especially in moments when we feel threatened and harmed, it's easy to slip into to a story that we've heard, that we've been told many times, that we've told ourselves many times. And so part of our mindfulness practice, my mindfulness practice, is to remember that it's always different. It's always different. And so too, as we're managing whatever is happening in our lives, to say, yes, there are parts of this we may have feels like we've seen before, but we're actually in a new moment. And that can be actually very empowering. And finally, Dr. Pollack talks about the all-important pivot. And in many ways, this is kind of a metaphor for equanimity. I feel like we've all become pivoting pros during the pandemic. Like we used to think we could make plans a week ahead of time, months ahead of time, years ahead of time. I used to joke that I needed to start a recovery group for Planners Anonymous, but alas, we cannot plan very easily anymore. We are always in the practice of pivoting these days. But I think that we can even look at pivoting as something that we do in our breath. So those of you who dance, you know, or you enjoy watching dancers, you know that the pivot is like, a shifting of balance, hopefully with some grace, in a way that the perspective changes, the body turns in a new direction, and we can see things a little bit differently. We lose sort of balance on one side only to regain it in another way. And I think we can practice this with our breath too, especially when it feels like there's too much on our plate, there's too much to handle. That we can sort of lose our breath, so to speak, or feel a constriction in our breath at one moment, and then find that breath again and realize that we can shift our perspective. And with that perspective, opening up perhaps some new creative possibility for taking the next step forward. So as I imagine Moses in that moment of total overwhelm, it doesn't feel like a far reach emotionally for me. And I'd like to think that part of what made him open to Yitro's sage advice was that capacity to pivot, to first really to be able to say, like, this is how things are. There's too much here for one human, for one leader. To be able to say it's like this, but it's different, that this could be a different moment. The way he has led and managed things up until this point are no longer sustainable. So what might be different about this, even though that can be hard to imagine? And then finally, kind of, again, that internal pivot of finding the breath again, of finding equanimity in difficult circumstances, and then kind of trying something new and finding his balance again. So I hope that this wisdom is supportive to you in your practice. I join you. So many people in our community, but also those outside of our community who have lovingly reached out to me and Rabbi Eric, just as representatives of our community. These are troubling times. We could probably say that at any time, but it feels even more so after the events of this weekend. And though we are so grateful beyond that the hostages made it out alive on Shabbat, late Saturday night, we are troubled, we are worried, we are concerned, and at times it can feel like too much amidst everything else we are also contending with. So I hope this is helpful, and I wish everyone a good rest of the day.